right. I hope everybody managed to join us, and welcome again to our Cyber Up webinar number 3. And this time we're going to be talking about diving into the secrets of SASE and SSE architecture. I'm super pleased to introduce my co-host this time, Evegeniy Kharam. I'm a big fan of Evgeny for a few years already, and I've watched all of his webcasts about architectures in the cybersecurity domain. So super thrilled to have him here. Evgeny, want to say hi?
Definitely, Tal. Thank you for having me here. It's very, very pleasant to kind of turn the table and have being here on the show versus have Perimeter 81 on the show. We spoke with you guys a couple of times on several podcasts, on security architecture podcast. When we spoke about remote access, we had a live show to talk about what's important in remote access. We did a bit of dive to secure web gateway as well. And I also had the opportunity to host Amit in his journey on the Cyber Inspiration podcast to understand how he started the company, what motivated him, and kind of the journey itself. So very happy to be here today.
That's great. Thanks a lot. So looking at what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be doing a deep dive webinar about the different types of architectures that are existing out there in the market from vendors and, of course, the way they are deployed with customers for SASE and SSE. We're going to be doing a short refresh.
Tal, I'm not sure if there's an issue with the live stream because I think we just lost Tal. James, you still here?
Yes. Hey, so I can continue where Tal left off. Today for the architecture discussion, we're going to discuss the difference between the private cloud and the public cloud, how those architectures would be different based upon which gateway types are available, based upon which protocols are recommended, and based upon any other changes that would be required. Also, we talk about agent-based versus agentless access, and we can explain that difference in terms of what are the prerequisites for getting it started. And then also IPSec versus Wireguard, a favorite topic of ours. As Perimeter 81, we are a leader in promoting and evangelizing Wireguard as the default choice for the protocol. And finally, end user experience and reporting. End user experience is one of the things that Perimeter 81 really prides itself on. And one of the things that we feel is important to discuss the difference between one type of architecture and the other type of architecture. And reporting, last but not least, is the pinnacle of everything, that if you don't know what's happening, then you cannot actually run an effective architecture.
Great, James, thank you very much. And I think we have Tal back, so we kind of, sometimes there's disruption on the internet, but we recovered. Tal, do you want to continue, or do you want to take over, talk about the architecture?
Yeah, definitely, guys. I'm so sorry. My internet suddenly died, which happens sometimes. I really apologize for that. James, thank you for taking my place here. So we're going to be talking about the difference in architectures between different solutions, and we're going to be touching a few pillars of those architectures. We're going to be talking about the actual features, capabilities, or functionality, and we're going to be talking about how they are reflected in the architecture or the architectural choices that a vendor or a company is making with the deployment. But before that, let me hand it off to Evgeny here to talk a little bit about SASE and do a refresher for all of us on all this.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely like to kind of level set to make sure we all understand what we're talking about. And this is going to be much easier to kind of building blocks to go on top. So 2019, Gartner came up with the new framework called Secure Access Service Edge. I think as an industry, there was already a lot of talk about what do we do with people that are traveling? What do we do with people that are on the go, or in some cases even work from home? So there was an idea of what do we do beyond perimeter, but Gartner kind of make it a more formalized statement and definition to it. So 3 years ago, they come up with the idea, what if I take multiple technologies and put them under one architecture, what is going to be? And we have 3 security vendors or products here and one more related to network. So secure web gateway, firewall as a service, CASB, and ZTNA under the security part. And the network itself, how do we bring it here? It created a lot of positive feedback in the industry, and many vendors agree with the framework. And they also realized there was quite a lot of synergy between the products, and one is very connected to each other. During this time, Gartner had the Magic Quadrant for firewalls, security web gateways, and CASB. There was no Magic Quadrant for ZTNA. Earlier this year, Gartner came up with a new name, and in this case, it wasn't a framework anymore. It was a vendor definition. So basically, they decided to remove the idea of the Magic Quadrant for every different product or vendor and have a new one called SSE, Security Service Edge, that will aggregate under one umbrella all the three products. So CASB, ZTNA, firewall, or / security web gateway. In a way, if you think about this, we don't care how the traffic get there. We care about the security component of this, how we provide access, what kind of access we provide, how do we check for malware, DLP, and many, many other different things. But this is on the high level. If we go on a level deeper, we'll see more definitions, what goes under network, what goes under security. And what's interesting to see here, that certain sections here are not so straightforward, because threat intelligence, it's a section by itself. But as a part of the definition, we want to provide an almost all-inclusive approach to the customers. We want to make sure they're secure when they're browsing. They don't need to go and manipulate their own threat intelligence. It comes as part of the vendor. Same as we do analytics, we do DLP, malware protection, and many different things to make sure we align to the idea. We're not going to jump right now to zero trust, but it's all in a way lead goes there as well. On the left side, you will see many network features, QoS, latency, routing, and many other different things, caching as well. So if we go deeper, in a way, network in SSE is no longer there, and the security features are still there. It could be a very healthy debate if we need the networking there and where they are working together. And it's also depend, how do we connect? Are we coming from the office, from the home, mobile? Are we part-time or full-time worker as well? But I think it's defined on the building blocks and where we're going from here. Quick explanation about the architecture as well. If we're talking about security web gateway and firewall as a service, if I'm connecting from the office or from the home, I am going to a centralized place in the cloud. And by saying centralized place, this could be a distributed different locations in the cloud. But for the end users who don't really know where it's going, they should go to the closest location in the cloud to get to the internet. In the past, we usually will go to the data center, because only was one location. Right now, depend on our geographical location, we'll go there and we'll get all the security components we need. SSL inspection, firewalling, URL filtering, and etc. With the remote access, we're coming from a different part. We want to connect back to our office. We want to connect to SaaS OAS applications. Ideally, we're going to the same cloud location. We understand what needs to be done. We check who we are, and then we get access to a particular application versus to a network segment, and where we can do anything we want. With the ZTNA, we only provide access to the application you need. This way, we are much more secure from perspective of what people can do with this, and also we don't expose anything to the internet as well from the office perspective. This is a very, very, very high kind of building blocks and level set. I know we can probably talk only about this for a couple of hours.
Yeah, I agree, Evgeny. But let's dive into the details and talk about these different architectures in another level of detail. I wanted to mention that at the base of all this kind of adoption or implementation of SASE, there's a big trend of moving to the cloud, right? SASE is usually implemented in the cloud, although architecturally speaking, it could also have on-prem components, right? And maybe there's a benefit to that as well. But generally speaking, all of the companies that that are out there, and 6 out of 10 have already moved their work to the cloud or are in transition process to the cloud. And that means that their attack surface is much, much wider. Instead of having it all centralized in one data center in one location, all those companies that have moved to the cloud actually have a much wider attack surface, and they need to upgrade their security measures to be able to meet those new threats. And as you can see on the bottom here, 94% of businesses report significant online security improvement after adopting the cloud, meaning the cloud transition also allows some of the companies to implement better security measurement and improve their entire security level in the organization. So that's an interesting starting point, I think. And let's just jump into the cloud part of the architecture. So talking about cloud architecture, we have two types of models that we see out there. One is a private cloud, and the other one is the public cloud. Private cloud can be demonstrated here, where a company actually have their own private cloud that they manage and maintain, meaning it's their own hardware in many cases, and they are managing that potentially in a specific data center, managing it by using their IT teams, right? And that means that from advantages perspective, there's of course the tightest privacy measurements that you could do, because everything is controlled by one entity. And of course, everything is under your. You can put your hand on any server that you want. But in terms of performance, it's not a shared resource. You also have that available, and you could potentially have deployment. If you have enough money to invest in those, you could potentially deploy it wherever the company is at. But we're not seeing that as much with smaller companies. Only the huge companies of the world, the Fortune 50 or 500 have the luxury of having that. And the disadvantages of that private cloud is the fact that, as I said, IT burden is really heavy. There's a cost to run and manage these data centers by themselves, and it's hard to scale it up, because again, if you need more compute power, etc., you just need, in many cases, to add more and more hardware, which is a longer process and a much more tiring one. What do you think, Evgeniy, about private cloud for, has a way of implementing SASE or security protocols?
So I guess, as we say in the industry, it really depends what you're trying to achieve. As everything, we want to have a tighter control, or we want to give control to someone else. If we, for example, do a step back and talk about a customer, if they want to focus on what they do and outsource us to IaaS, AWS, then in some cases they will have less things to do, even so they still need to maintain this. If they go and give it to managed services, then they even less need to do stuff. I think in a customer perspective, when they outsource their network security for remote access, CASB, and browsing as well, they want to get a service right now. They don't want to go and kind of play with nuts and bolts. But you mentioned a very important part. What's important for me? What kind of data I have as a customer? Do I want this data to potentially be exposed to somebody else? What if another customer get hacked? That would I be affected or not? And this will really depend on you. Now, as a service provider in a SASE world, it's really interesting as well, because when you have your private cloud, you're the ones that controlling the hardware. Yes, you mentioned there are potentially more expenses to do it, but then it's really depend how well you're doing this to understand how many customers are coming, what potentially will be the exposure and how big it will be, to make sure you have enough hardware. And if you do a smart control on the hardware, then you will be able to save money as well. Now, of course, if you have a customer in one geographical location and you don't have a data center there, then they will not have a very good potential user experience. So you need to understand where majority of your customers are located and make sure you have a presence in this location. On the other side, if you have a customer with a very distributed environment, then you need to understand, okay, would every office of this customer or user in this customer will have a very good experience? And there could be a chance that you have a customer in Japan, just making stuff up right now, that you are not able to provide them a good service because you don't have the data centers there. So it's pros and cons everywhere.
Yeah, I fully agree, Evgeny. I mean, we as a company, we saw that the flexibility. We have both privately held cloud, and we all also deployed on public clouds, and we saw that the private cloud implementation actually helped us reach areas where there is still no AWS or Azure or Google data center. We are able to deploy in those locations, which someday AWS and Azure will cover the whole world, but until they do, having a private cloud SASE infrastructure is actually very helpful for that global reach.
So this is an interesting point you bring. In this case, if I were the customer and I'm buying a new solution, I should ask, like, depending on my data, is this architecture private or cloud? But I think it's even more importantly to ask, if I open a location in middle of nowhere, how fast you can actually bring up a cloud for me to support me. This well, you're able to understand how good is the support and how fast the access I can get.
Yeah, definitely so. I fully agree. And let's move to the next slide, which talks about the public cloud, right? And we all often compare the public cloud versus the private cloud. And when we say public cloud, that means deployment of the SASE infrastructure on Azure, or Google or Alibaba or AWS, of course. So the advantages of actually similar to the disadvantages of the private cloud. There's a cost saving because obviously there's a lower IT cost because there is no need to manage the actual hardware, right? The cloud resources are basically a service. And you could argue whether it's cheaper or not, but having the IT team to maintain hardware is always an operational burden. It's always an operational headache. So that definitely is helpful there. Limited maintenance, when the vendor is responsible for all maintenance in the cloud, whether it's AWS or the SASE vendor, again, it is much easier for the customer to deploy. They don't need to handle any kind of software upgrades, any kind of configuration change on the cloud installation, on the cloud resources, etc. And of course, reliability is something that comes not for free, but very easily with a public cloud deployment, because it is easy to deploy an auto-scale solution and reliable solution on public cloud that already have multiple locations, multi-zone deployment, and that can be a huge benefit, because building actual reliability mechanism on a private cloud can be a little bit harder. Just covering here the disadvantages, then we can talk about them all. And the advantages, of course, there's a security concern because public cloud is a shared resource. Some people can access it, not only people from your company. Compliance is something we should probably discuss, Evgeny, and migration to the public cloud can take some time. From many of the companies already are existing on their own private data centers, so the actual migration itself can be a bit painful. What do you think, Evgeny? What do you think are the big yes and no points here?
So before I go this, I kind of have a question that I was thinking about it. And by the way, I think it's a live show, so I know it's a live show. We can have people questions asking as well. So guys, if you are listening to this right now, feel free to ask us questions. We're definitely going to answer them in the end. What about SLAs? Because we spoke about private and public cloud. What do you think is easier to have SLAs in a public cloud or private cloud? And I have a feeling Tal has an internet issues right now as well. So I kind of move the conversation forward. With the public cloud, I have, as a vendor, my own SLAs, and I also have the SLAs from the public cloud as well. So the AWS, Azure, and GCP. In a private cloud, there is still the hosted infrastructure where it's located, and the SLA is there. But in majority of the cases, I am the one that maintaining the SLAs. Tal, while you had issues with the internet, I kind of brought a question about SLAs. And I want to kind of have a small debate.
Yeah.
What do you think the SLAs for the customer mean when you talk about public or private cloud?
Yeah. That's a big question. When you're relying on an external third party, cloud infrastructure, sometimes you are dependent on their, SLA, right? If AWS has availability issues, then you may be suffering, pain, which is not your own fault, right? So to some extent, there's a double-edged sword here on the reliability of the public cloud resources. But again, if you are going to measure that comparably private versus public, it may be very hard to also implement a very good and resilient multi-zone private cloud, wouldn't it?
Yes, it will be. It's kind of double-edged sword in a way how you build it correctly. And I think it's just important in this case to explain the customer the SLA, how it's working, and how you're doing this more from policy and compliance perspective, that the customer will understand how it's going. The more SLA you want, the more resilient you want, in the end of the day, the more money you'll be paying. And in some cases, customers don't understand this, and you're like, oh, why it's so expensive? Oh, because you wanted XYZ. So you need to understand what's more important for you, and this is what you're going to be paying for as well.
I agree. And I'm seeing many more questions about compliance and regulatory compliance recently. The normal question would be, how do you give me locality in my region? Meaning, there are many services, even government services is obvious, but even non-government services, some health services and financial services that require that the actual data or the gateways or the actual management of the platform, everyone in a different level, resides in the same country as the company is operating. And that means that we're moving into a model that has to be much more distributed, right? Eventually, if we want to support all this, we're going to have a distributed SASE edge, right? Something that will do the actual processing and data storage inside the country, whereas potentially management on a global or international basis would be elsewhere. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely a very good point, that you have to be distributed, but then you're going to have a way to aggregate the data, and maybe in some cases mask the data as well, in case the customer doesn't want you to have access. Right now, I'm actually talking to one of the customers and managed service provider, where we're discussing what kind of access the company employee from the vendor perspective may have access to the data. So if you're a SASE provider or a SSE provider, can you, as an employee of this company, see the data of Evgeniy, or you cannot? Or what kind of data you can see? So if I have the ability to mask the data or only get access to the data with the customer approval, then it maybe also will fit majority of the compliance and regulation perspective as well.
Yeah, exactly. So Evgeniy, just to summarize this kind of topic, which is super important, what do you recommend to SASE customers with regards to public or private cloud? What kind of questions, what kind of decisions should they be making around this area?
So first of all, they have to talk to the legal, understand what kind of requirements they have to share with the information. If there is no specific requirement, then we kind of remove one layer of complexity. Then they want to understand, okay, is there a particular SLA we need to have access to the internet? Because don't forget, we're not protecting the data center right now. We're protecting access to the internet, and in some cases, we're protecting access to the applications. So after that, they will figure out, okay, well, this is the SLA I need. Based on this, they now can look on features and pricing. Because in some cases, there may be no difference between public and cloud for this particular people, because there is no compliance or SLA requirements.
Great point. All right, I think we're ready to move to the next architectural pillar, and this one is agent-based versus agentless. The different types of SASE or SSE architectures vary on the way they are implemented on the end user side. Meaning, is there an agent that needs to be installed on the endpoint, or does the security service works in an agentless mode without any kind of required installation? So let's talk about these two, summarize them quickly so we can understand what they mean. So an agent-based mode is usually available for managed devices. Why is that? Because if you want to make sure your employees install the agent, you have to manage their devices. You can also ask them, but I'm not sure how will that actually go. An agentless mode actually works with BYOD, meaning every type of privately held device can actually work in an agentless mode and can have, its own level of security without any kind of installation. Protocol support, agent base is basically creating that all protocols can exist. So there is no necessarily limitation on the protocols. Agentless usually supports a limited set of protocols, which includes web, SSH, RDP, sometimes SQL, sometimes a bit more. But these are kind of the primary ones. They're still very helpful because in many cases, many people just want to connect to their workstation, in which case RDP works for them, or they want to connect to a kind of a web-based application, so that works as well. So this covers, these protocols are, of course, limited compared to all, but still cover a very nice variety of applications. The ease of use depends on the implementation. Is it easy to install an agent and manage it or not? It really depends on the vendor. And Evgeniy, I'm going to ask you about that one in a second. And the agentless obviously is easiest because you don't need to install anything. The performance is usually higher when we talk about agent-based connectivity. That is because, again, we're working on a tunnel. There's something that is installed on the computer that can actually work more effectively and use the compute power there. And the and the actual tunnel in which it works, which is IPSec or Wireguard, which we're going to talk about, are more effective than the connectivity when we talk about the agentless connectivity. And the last bit is about security. It's normally higher when we are an agent-based implementation compared to an agentless implementation. Evgeniy, what do you think about these? What do you think about the ease of use, first of all? This is a curious one.
Yeah, ease of use is definitely important. And we're mainly talking about right now remote access. So we're talking about remote access, the ease of use is very applicable. Do I work with a full-time employee or do I work with a contractor that potentially only here for part-time? In my mind, if I have somebody for part-time, I may want to go with the agentless approach because I don't want to manage this device. And maybe this particular person has multiple customers. Also with the agentless approach, I may have easier way to not allow him to download files to his device. Now, having said this, if I'm working with a full-time employee, I have a much greater security controls with the agent because, first of all, I probably have something already on the device, MDM, EDR, VP antivirus. And also with the agent approach, I can do host checker. I can check, are you coming from a compliant device? Right. Are you allowed to even connect to my information as well? I can definitely do the same with the third-party contractors or somebody is part-time as well. But as you mentioned, do I have even access to their device or not? So this is important. In some cases, I may need applications that are not part of the browser. So with the agent approach, it's going to be much easier. I just launch the agent in the morning, do my MFA multi-factor authentication, and it's running the entire day or maybe even more, and I can completely forget about this. With the agentless approach, is running inside the browser. It means I am kind of stuck with the browser approach, and maybe certain other things will not work as part of my environment, like a fat client in these cases as well. As there is other things that can be built as well with agentless approach. I think it's much easier to record my session, for example. With the agent-based approach is a bit different, but also possible as well. So it sort of really depends the use cases I want to use for a customer environment and what we want to achieve. So we'll start from the use cases, what I want to achieve, how do I want to achieve it, and go from there. If I summarize, probably agent for an employee for the company, agentless for somebody that's very part-time.
That's a great point, Evgeniy. I heard that I heard some companies are actually looking for an agentless even for their employees when they are using their BYODs, meaning when you're using the company managed device, use an agent-based, managed kind of access solution. But if you want to access through your personal iPad or your home computer, here's an agentless version of our solution so that you can also access from there. Do you hear that as well?
It is a good point, because I'm assuming in this case, I'm going to have less privileges. With the edgeless approach, I may not able to download the document. I may view the document, but cannot download it. So I still allow you connectivity, do your work, even if you're on vacation, that you really want to connect. But it's mean you cannot upload or download documents, because I don't want to jeopardize the security of the company. This makes total sense to me.
Yeah. What do you think about compliance on BYOD devices? I think, the technology exists to actually do it, but there aren't many solutions that actually, run compliance check as a runtime kind of process that, finishes and exits.
I think the entire idea of BYOD is very, very spooky. Halloween is coming right now, and the entire idea of people understanding of BYOD is also very gray area. Many companies that I'm speaking with says, "Oh, our policy says we not allow BYOD." Great, this is your written policy. What about the security controls? It's like, "Oh, no, we're not allowed." Okay, if I go to Best Buy and buy a laptop, can I connect Office 365? Probably yes. So there's a lot of misunderstanding on what I can or cannot do.
Yeah.
There is a way to fix it, but it's hard. As you mentioned in the beginning, I need access to a device. I need a tie to MDM. I need to tie to some kind of conditional access. Host checker understands that you're part of domain, or you have a piece of something on your laptop that can explain that you are you and your device is BYOD. In the past, we used to use certificate, but this is just a nightmare for IT to have certificate all the time and to be distributed and changed. So we need to adapt to newer ways. And I think the idea of host checker, when you connect with the agent remotely, that check for domain access or something else particular, will help people to modify this information and then push. There's, of course, of people personal preferences, like, "Oh, what do you mean it's my personal device? Why do you want to push an MDMs there?"
Right.
And unfortunately, here we're coming back to compliance and to HR rules in a company and how they manage this.
Exactly. And sometimes people would not even allow a posture check solution to run on their device, right? Sometimes they would block it. They would not allow it to run as an admin. There are ways to mess with that as well.
It's probably, a conversation like, do I work from home or do I work from the office? There is no correct way to do it. Everybody do something differently. Yeah. But if the company decided this is our company policy and explain why, then at the end of the day, employees need to understand why they're doing this and comply.
Yeah. And in addition, they have to set up their security policy inside their firewall and remote access solution to match, right? To make sure that it reflects their policy. All right. Let's talk about IPSec versus Wireguard. I mentioned that earlier. So first of all, a refresher on Wireguard benefits. Wireguard is a more advanced protocol that has better performance, enhanced security via providing the ability to use more and more advanced encryption mechanisms. And there is no certificate needed. I mean, you could use it, but it's not a needed solution. So basically, Wireguard has a few benefits over IPSec, and we see that its adoption is growing out there. It basically offers about 15% higher throughput and about 20% lower latency compares to IPSec. So it's basically, IPSec on speeds. So there's a definite benefit over here. There's a decision also to be made to use Wireguard over IPSec, and there are some legacy operating systems that still don't support Wireguard, and companies that stay with IPSec are staying with IPSec mostly because of legacy equipment out there that doesn't necessarily support Wireguard well. But in general, when we look at the comparison, we do believe that Wireguard is a better choice for, enhanced productivity, better security, and lower latency. Evgeniy, what do you think this means for the actual architecture or the SASE solution selection?
If we're coming to office, it probably doesn't change. But if you're coming for end user to the internet, I think it's definitely important, because if I can have less latency, a faster speed, then why not? Why not just have something that's working better?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And there's a question here about how do you deal with the legacy operating systems, right? So I think from architectural perspective, a good solution, a good SASE solution would be wise to support both of them, both WireGuard and IPSec, in order to connect to potentially old routers, old gateways out there that still don't support WireGuard well. Whereas using WireGuard with AWS resources or any kind of other public cloud resource that does support WireGuard, right? Would that be a good recommendation?
Yes, definitely. There are still some companies that do GRE as well from office to office, but
Yeah.
and IPSec unfortunately has limitation as well on the amount of bandwidth. And I saw companies where they need to provision multiple IPSec tunnels to get more than 200 meg, for example, from the office. So definitely, if WireGuard is supported, why not to choose a better architecture and better protocol?
That's great. All right, moving to the next aspect, which is the end user experience. Now, the end goal, for every customer or vendor would be to have a seamless and invisible solution to the end user as possible. Our customers want to get the security and protection without actually having to burden the end users with managing an agent or managing any kind of end user software. There are a few ways to enforce, to implement a better end user experience, having, automatic reconnection, having automated installation using MDM, using user experience monitoring, and some more ways. I'm kind of hurrying up here because we're a little bit short on time. Evgeniy, what do you think? How do you think the market right now is doing with regards to end user experience? Are the solutions out there good enough?
I don't want to say it depends again, but a lot of solutions provide the good user experience from a connectivity perspective. But I think the problem coming there is, in the past, when I was in the office and something didn't work, we always blame the firewall right away. It's the firewall. You guys made the change. Right now, if I'm home, who do I blame? Do I blame my computer? Do I blame my internet provider? Do I blame the connectivity app? Do I blame the application I'm going there? So it's hard to understand. So from a support perspective, I think the end user experience is something doesn't work, and I can quickly tell them, yes, it's your internet. Oh, no, this is my agent. Or it's the end resources. But this is on the lower level. On the higher level, if I call support, this is not going to be the end user, it's probably going to be somebody, the security team or IT team, and they can help me to troubleshoot quickly, then I'm in a much better space. Or maybe as a vendor, I provide health connectivity to how my infrastructure is working. And this will definitely help people to get a quicker support, understanding what's happening, and understanding where's the problem happening as well. So kind of this quick points to understand if I'm the problem, if something else is the problem, and how do you resolve the problem as well.
That's a great point. So basically, user experience monitoring is important, both for the IT admin, and eventually it's going to provide value to the end user as well, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. And the last point, last pillar we wanted to talk about is reporting, right? So logs and reports are crucial to the business operation and security of the organization, right? I mean, being able to monitor what happened in your network, what happened to your users, and what did your users do or not do is super critical for, the health and security of the network. There are a few ways to implement good reporting, and I mentioned just a few of them. Of course, we have many, many more. But of course, everything starts with good detailed logs, right? Whether they are traffic logs, security incident logs, any kind of user experience problem kind of logs. There could be, thousands of logs up to a point where it's actually hard to read and hard to extract the insights from them. Now, the logs are usually exported when there's a large amount of those to a SIEM, which is an external system that helps manage and store for a longer period of time these types of logs. Now, based on these logs, you could generate reports, right, that actually take the data, summarize it, and make it more digestible. And if you're really, really good and advanced, you also have deep data analytics and insights that look into all of the logs together in a holistic way and generate insights coming out of those entire set of monitoring tools that is your logs and the monitoring tools that exist in your system. So these are, potential for implementations going from the easiest or the basic one to more advanced one. Evgeny, where do you think we are as an industry? Are we,
the industry somewhere in between, because there's a couple of use cases, as you mentioned. And one, because we all right now distributed, in many cases, the employee want to understand, is Evgeny doing his work? Is he actually working or he's doing something else? So it's not security related. In the past, HR wanted to know if Evgeny was on Facebook the entire day. Now we want to understand more if Evgeny was actually working. We also
more
make
productivity of a question,
yes.
Right?
We also, because everything is connected, so it's meaning I'm browsing, I cannot just do my work on my laptop. I'm probably using some kind of external resources as well.
Right.
Now, from a hunting or analytics perspective, if something happened in the company, you mentioned security incident, I may want to go into the logs and understand, okay, we found a problem with Evgeny using an antivirus or an EDR solution, and we want to understand more now from a reporting capabilities, what happened, where Evgeny went, where Evgeny browsed, what he downloaded, or where he connected. It's more detailed report. But this could be a manual work. Where the industry is going and what we want to see, we want to like a magic button. It will press and say, oh, this is what happened with Evgeny. We don't need to go and search. Or it will be predictive and tell us, by the way, Evgeny is acting fishy. He usually don't log into these devices. He usually don't go there, but now he is. And I think this is the industry claiming where they want to be, but we're still not there. We're still more in the manual stuff. But the reports can indicate that something is happening with Evgeny. Evgeny never downloaded any information from CRM, and now we see a very big activity from Evgeny. Is Evgeny leaving the company?
Very good point. And, these kind of logging capabilities will actually allow you to reach better security and do insecurity investigations or even user-specific problem investigation, right?
Yeah.
All right. I think we're going to the Q&A section of our webinar today. We don't have a lot of time for that because the discussion was so great and so interesting. So we'll have just a couple of questions from the audience. If you have some more questions, feel free to add them here. First question is, how does this all relate to zero trust? I know we are discussing SASE and SSE, but this is a huge topic. So, Evgeny, do you wanna tackle this one?
I can start first one. So first of all, is completely related. They're attached on a hip together. Nothing in SSE and SASE should be happening without understanding who you are. In the past, we created rules based on source network and source IP. So, for example, if you are on the first floor, you have one set of rules, but if you move to a different floor, now you have a different set of rules. Then we realized that it's a bad idea, and we connected our security web gateways and firewalls to Active Directory, and we became more advanced to create rules if you're marketing on IT. But now when we're working from home or working from anywhere, there's no idea of source IP at all. It doesn't really mean anything. So I need to create rules based on your user profile. And the entire idea of zero trust is understand who you are, what kind of access you have. So remote access, ZTNA, secure web gateway, it's all related to who you are, from where you're coming, and what you're doing. So there's really attachment on a hip. It's just zero trust. It's a topic by itself, that it's humongous as well. But SASE and SSE are related and a part of the zero trust journey.
That's great, Evgeny. Thank you. And another question. There have recently been many cases of social engineering cybersecurity incidents. How do you think SASE can help tackle those?
Social engineering. Social engineering could be done by phone, could be done by email, could be done by Telegram or Facebook. But eventually it means that I send you some kind of URL in many cases that you wanted to click on it. So, of course, if I send you a WhatsApp message or text message and you need to reply something, it may not work. But if I send you a URL and you click on this URL by mistake, and as a SASE vendor, we know this URL is malicious because of threat intelligence, and block this URL, then we're able to help the social engineering aspect.
That's exactly true, Evgeny. I would add to that social engineering is still the human factor, right? And there's a limit to how much you can actually control that. In that case, training helps a lot. Not necessarily related to our SASE platform, but it is a very helpful way to deal with those. And tight security controls and zero trust, least privileges kind of policy will help minimize a damage that even a social engineering event, can cause. So limiting the access to sensitive resources can help, protect your company, even if, social engineering actually happens and the hacker is able to get into the systems through that.
I would like to add something here. I think not just security awareness, but also teach the users in the company what are the ways for IT to access them. Because we heard multiple times lately that somebody claiming they're IT, but they're not IT. So
exactly.
teach the people, if IT calls you, this is what they're going to do. Same with CRA or somebody else calling you, you understand what they can or cannot do, and you will know if it's there or there. They have to identify themselves, give the number, give the phone, and you can call them back. The bad guys usually will not tell them who you are, besides John Smith, and will not give you a correct number to call them back.
Exactly. Great point, Evgeny. Thanks a lot. All right, let me introduce you another guest speaker in our webinar, James Alvarez from our team, Regional Sales Director. And he will be providing a demo for Zero Trust and also kind of referring to the points we've raised here in our talk. James?
Thank you so much for the intro, Tal and Evgeny. I really appreciated watching that segment, extremely informative. And I'd like to continue this conversation with a practical demonstration of the Zero Trust platform that we may be able to offer. And within this demonstration, I'll cover some of the same topics that were covered in the segment led by Tal and Evgeny, which have covered, first of all, the reporting, some of the differences between architecture to private cloud and public cloud, the end user experience, and more. So I'll welcome you to Perimeter 81's platform. And what we're looking at here, this is the administrative dashboard that shows us a complete view of our entire network. And reporting is one thing, but to have visibility and to have insights is another thing. So this network here, it has only about 4 users on it actively right now. We have another network here with actually quite a bit more internal users. So I want to show you a glance into this. When we see here, this is an actual network with about 100 daily active users. Currently, right now, we have about 85. And what it looks like over time is we can see a flow of different amounts of data, and we could see a flow of different amounts of users into the network at different times. And we're also able to see the bandwidth consumption here. So this is very, very important for us to see and to get an overall glance into the health and the current status of the network. And when we want to, we can also dive deeper and go into the active users at any time. And active users, we could see here, for example, these 4 team members across different continents, across different devices, and that is giving us the clarity, and that's giving us the information that we're looking to achieve. Now, going a little bit deeper into the architecture, it's important to always talk about those users and to get a high level about it, because user identity is one of the pillars of Zero Trust architecture. And as Evgeny mentioned, that Zero Trust and SASE and SSE are sort of brothers, right, or distant cousins with each other. They're very closely related. And the way I like to think of it is that the Zero Trust concept is a mindset. It is a philosophy. And SSE or SASE are the practical implementations, the current versions of that mindset and of that philosophy. And so in our platform here, the way we show that is by looking at all the users in one place and by seeing which identity provider that they came from. It may even be possible that there's multiple identity providers taken in each account so that there's multiple layers of that. And we can make absolutely certain that whether the user is coming from one directory or the other, that they're still strongly authenticated and strongly verified. So going a little bit deeper than that, what we'd see naturally after we begin to populate the users into our workspace would be to assign them into groups. And the purpose of groups is to give permission and access into predefined networks or ranges of the networks. Then as we would build out our networks in Perimeter 81, we would want to define those networks typically by the resources of which they're provisioning access into. And one of the things that we see most typically with our customers and even ourselves is to have the separation between the physical network environments, maybe the corporate headquarters or corporate data center, and then also the production environments that are in the cloud, and maybe even alongside the production environment, some staging environments or testing environments that may also coexist. And common example for that might be the corporate network, and we would want to build out a wide-ranging set of gateways instead of regions to support a vast amount of users across multiple different geographic areas. And we have this collector, this gateway in this network that will be able to bridge all of the users' traffic from the outside world back to the inside of the network and the resources that are needed. And we like to say that no two networks in Perimeter 1 are quite the same. And that is true. The more you see, the more you realize that every difference is important. One of the things that makes networks different is the fact that every gateway has its own static dedicated IP address, which will never be the same as any others. And also the fact that each gateway has the capability to make a tunnel that will bridge the last mile into any of the designed or intended networks that the company would need. So these are some examples of tunnels going out into multiple different environments, such as Azure, a on-premise firewall with a Wireguard connector, an on-premise firewall with a Palo Alto gateway, another Azure connector. So we've demonstrated here multiple examples of bridging that last mile of connectivity, which is crucial. And like we said, no two networks in Perimeter 1 are alike, no two customers in Perimeter 1 are alike, and that is the purpose for doing this, so that every organization has its own custom design network. The next step, logically, in the process of implementing this architecture of SASE and SSE specifically, would be to design a proper set of firewall rules. Once we build that connectivity, we want to actually define, first of all, whether we want to, by default, allow all traffic and restrict down from there, or if we'd like to, by default, deny all traffic and then allow traffic up from there. And those are the two ways. The more traditional, more purist zero trust architecture would be to deny all traffic and then to allow up from there, and to always have a baseline rule to deny all traffic. And that can be an interesting way to fully lock down your network environments. Other capabilities that Perimeter 1 has to offer, which we're very supportive of, are filtering on top of the network layer. So this firewall rule here does restrictions based upon port, protocol, and IP address, either a single IP address, a list of IP addresses, or a range of IP addresses. But we can go even deeper into the traffic, and this is where we would want to actually do a lightweight SSL decryption and an inspection of that traffic to determine whether or not the content of the traffic itself fits our company's policies. And those policies can be very simple. Obviously, we want to block out any of the malware or any of the most dangerous types of content that could be possible. But then there are other categories that we might want to block, and that depends on our interpretation. But generally, I like to follow the rule that these are things that are unsafe, unprofessional, and unproductive in a proper workplace. So we can all use our imagination and think about things that we probably shouldn't be doing in the workplace. And there's many different lists and many different categories that we would consider under that. And we're providing you the capability to do that by deploying these policies instantly out to all of your users. There's typical safeguards in here, like bypass rules. We can bypass authorized apps. We can bypass personally identifiable information like healthcare or banking. And those are some of the capabilities and safeguards that we've thought through quite deeply. But all in all, to encapsulate everything that we've shown, Perimeter 1 is going to lead this space in terms of deploying SSE architecture into the real world. And we provide all of the pillars that are required, such as a strong synchronization to identity and access management solutions, a strong and resilient network architecture that resides on multiple different types of cloud with a high SLA and a very high performance. Performance in Perimeter 1 specifically being driven by the Wireguard protocol, which was covered in previous slides and talked about. We find this to be our key differentiator, and it's one of the reasons why we can eclipse legacy technologies and protocols such as OpenVPN, The gap here and the increase given by Wireguard is about 4 times faster and 4 times greater throughput than OpenVPN, and about 20 to 25% greater throughput and greater performance than the other predecessor of IPSec version 1 and 2. And then finally, to end it, we have some of the most in-depth logs that we could possibly provide, which are related to all the active users, all of the member activity, and then that is finally encapsulated here on a dashboard that we can see and we can track and we can report. So based upon that, I will leave it back to questions and continue the Q&A if we have any.
Thank you, James. Let's see if we have any additional questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to add them on the screen over on the right side pane. Oh, I see a question about Wireguard. James, from your experience, or Evgeny, what are the challenges for deploying Wireguard? Is it harder from configuration perspective, and why is it not more widely deployed?
I guess I could address that, since this is one of the main things that I handle on a day-to-day basis. So Wireguard, I think the biggest gap for Wireguard is just awareness, and that's why we really try to evangelize it. To those who know, it seems kind of really like a new standard. It seems like the place to be, but still a lot of people are not fully aware of it. So I try to talk about it on every conversation, every architecture review that I do, and it's really catching on. And we say it's new, but it's only been a couple of years since it was fully released. So that's why I think that there's still a gap of awareness on that. But in terms of deployment, in reality, it's not much more work or not much more of a deployment than connecting any other set of tunnels onto any traditional set of firewalls. So we would definitely recommend that in any environment that is being built fresh, or even in any existing environment that desires that extra degree of performance that Wireguard can bring to the table.
That's a great point. Evgeny, anything to comment?
No, really, I agree. It's just it's relatively newer and not very available, and not a lot of support yet for majority of the vendors. And it just time to get there. I think it will catch up, and people will realize it's much easier to use, and there are a lot of benefits there as well.
Great point. All right, one last question from the audience. Would it have visibility of traffic from and to verified third-party applications? I think talking about SASE platform, does it have visibility of traffic to and from the third-party applications? I can answer that. Yeah, I think the question is, do you have visibility of the actual traffic that goes to a third-party application in, potentially agentless mode? Or could be also in an agent mode. I don't know what the asker.
I think here is more about between two applications. So it doesn't pass SASE SSE vendor? Probably not.
Okay.
But again, I think the question is, if the person asking the question, can you maybe explain if it's kind of between two applications or between the end user on Office to the application? It's going to be easier to answer.
Let's answer both then. If from an end user to a third-party application, if it goes through, the security, service or the SASE service, whether it's agent-based or agentless, yes, there is visibility. It really depends on the implementation. For example, for the agentless access, there are some solutions out there that do recording of the actual traffic that goes to the third-party applications that are, verified and approved. So yes, there is visibility when it comes to an end user to a third-party application. And Evgeny, do you want to cover the application to application case, which is the other one?
In my mind, if it's application to application, you're probably not able to see the traffic because it's going to go direct without SASE, so it probably will not.
Could be. So it's not actually going through the SASE solution. It could be going between two applications in a public cloud, right? Between Azure and AWS, between,
or SaaS,
different types. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's the way it is. All right. We're out of time here. Thank you so much, Evgeny and James, for participating. Thank you, everyone who joined our webinar, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.